It's Wednesday night, and we're studying through the Old Testament. Sometimes these facts and these events and peoples and measurements of the temple and the various furniture of the temple, it gets very complex, very intricately detailed. And I'd just like to point out some things to you before I get started. Maybe this is the starting point of the message. But we have gone through we've gone through the book of Genesis. Took us about 3 years to go through Genesis. That took us from Adam all the way through Joseph. And Joseph is in bondage, and he's actually in Egypt as the second in command in Egypt. But when he dies, there in Exodus, the first chapter, Israel is put into bondage because a new king rises up that does not know Joseph intimately, and he knows about his exploits and how he saved Egypt, but he doesn't have any use for the Jews, so he puts them in bondage, afraid that he's going to be outnumbered, they're going to outnumber the Egyptians. And this is what Israel did. In the bondage they did this. They did this in the captivity when they were carried off. They were in bondage in Egypt. They were in the captivity over here in Babylon. What we call Iraq is Babylon. There's the Euphrates, here's the Tigris. And down in lower Iraq, right close to the Persian Gulf, where they had that Persian War in Kuwait down here, right down here in the bottom of Iraq is the city of Babylon on the Euphrates River. And in right about where Baghdad is was the capital city of Assyria, which was northern Babylon. Now, we talked about how the Israel was carried into bondage in Egypt. Then after they come out of Egypt, spend 800 years or so in Israel and go after Baal in the Grove and Shemash and Molech, God has them carried away into captivity. So they're in bondage over here in Egypt, in captivity over here in this is about 1,000 years apart. A captivity over here in Babylon. So we got them all out of bondage, and we brought them to, when they got out of bondage, it was 12 plagues that brought them out. The last plague was the death of the firstborn. That was the Passover. And that's why the Bible says, when I see the blood upon the doorpost of the house, I will pass over you, and the firstborn will not die in the household. And then they come through the Red Sea in the 14th chapter, and Pharaoh and his armies are all drowned. And then they come over here to Mount Sinai. They get to Mount Sinai. I believe Sinai is down here in the Sinai Peninsula. If this is Egypt, if you've got, here's Israel, here's the Mediterranean Sea, and then, of course, this goes up into Turkey, and then Egypt is down here, and you get on to Western Africa over here, Africa, and the tip of Africa, and then, of course, Spain comes down to the tip of Africa, and you enter into the Mediterranean Sea by the Strait of Gibraltar, and that's where you have the Rock of Gibraltar there. And Israel was in bondage over here in Egypt. And then when they come out, they cross the Red Sea. I believe that now the Bible says in the 4th chapter of Galatians that Mount Sinai was in Arabia. But they had about 2.5 million people leave Egypt, that's estimated, and they couldn't have got over to what we call Arabia today in just 10 days. So these 2.5 million people, I believe they went down here into the Sinai Peninsula, and somewhere down here someone down here in the Sinai Peninsula is Mount Sinai, because they had to go to Kadesh Barnea, which is just below Israel, and when they got to Kadesh Barnea, they went over to attack the Anakims there, or spy them out anyway. But when they were carried away in around 586 BC, That's when southern Judah was carried away into captivity into Babylon. Bondage over here, captivity over here. Well, when they were carried away into captivity, that was in 586. When they left Egypt, that was around 1450. So you were about 900 years difference between the two. 900 years after they come out of Egypt, 900 years later they're carried into captivity because all of the idol worship they got involved in over here in Israel. And I believe that they were carried off down here somewhere, Sinai. We don't know exactly where. But when they got to Sinai, that was in Exodus, the 18th chapter. In the 19th chapter, Moses goes up into the mountain, meets God in the 20th chapter, and brings down the 10 Commandments in the 20th chapter. Then the 25th chapter, Moses starts getting instructions. They stay at Sinai up to the first through Numbers, the 10th chapter. Numbers 10. They stay at Sinai. So Exodus, when they get there, in the 18th chapter, in the 19th chapter he goes up there, they're there from Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, right in the middle of Numbers, the 10th chapter, they leave Mount Sinai. So Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, what they're doing in Exodus is getting the law. They get to Sinai in that 18th chapter, and they're getting the law from God. Moses is going up talking to God, and he's giving him law specifically, and it takes him a long time to give him all the laws for Israel. So he's giving him the laws, and in that 25th chapter, let me show you something. It's interesting. He starts giving them instructions to build the tabernacle and all the furniture of the tabernacle. You only have 6 pieces of furniture for the tabernacle. That's it. You've got the tabernacle, and then you've got the veil here, and you've got the Ark of the Covenant. We're looking at it from a bird's eye view from the top. You've got the Ark of the Covenant. You have the 7 candlesticks. You have the table of showbread. We don't know exactly how it was shaped. We know the length and width of them. And the altar of incense. And all these inside here were of beaten gold. And then you had, outside that, you had the brazen altar. Brazen. And you had the brazen sea, or the brassy sea. Brazen sea. And we don't know exactly how this brass was. Some say it was a mixture of copper and zinc, or copper and brass. It's just a guess. We don't know exactly. But we do know that this furniture in here was built and was overlaid with gold, with beaten gold inside. These were brass. But let me show you something that's kind of interesting. We talked about how that God gave instructions, and where we are, we're over in the 30th chapter. Let's read the first 2 verses, and I want to show you something that's interesting. Something that I haven't found the answers to yet. It's either one of 2 things, and I'm still working on it. It's in the book of Ezekiel. But look here at verse 1. Thou shalt make an altar to burn incense upon, of shittim wood shalt thou make it. Now this was believed to be acacia, A-C-A-C-I-A. ACA. That's what it was believed to be. And the reason it was made of that, because it would not rot. It would last for hundreds of years. And the reason they need that is because they're going to last for 900 years before they're carried away into Babylon. Now, and of course, Babylon is where the Ark of the Lord was carried away captive. Now, then he says, this is the altar of incense. This is this altar right here. Instructions for this altar. Right there. That's the altar of incense, where that some say they had a censer, and it was made of gold. That's just like a cup. We don't know what it was shaped like. In a handle, a golden handle and a golden cup. And this censer, they would take fire from off of this altar here. This is the law of Moses. And some say that they would lay the censer down between the two cherubim on the altar, and that somehow in some kind of container they would bring the incense in, put it in this bowl here where all the coals were that they got off the altar, and that it would begin to cloud up that inner sanctuary, or the Holy of Holies, or what was called the house of God. And we're God's house now. And the reason for clouding it up is because the high priest would come in and lay flat down on the floor after he sprinkled the Ark of the Covenant, offered the incense. God would come down out of the Shekinah glory, sit down on that ark, and he had to keep his face covered up, because if he looked up at the ark, God would strike him dead. If he looked up at him, and he would strike him dead right then. And some say they tied a rope around their legs so they could drag him out until one of the next high priest in line. You have to go in and do it right. Now, I want to show you something here that's interesting. This will show you how the least things are important in the Bible. Let me show you something here. Now, that altar of incense, I'll just draw it over here so if I need to refer to it. And here it is right there. Table of showbread. Candlesticks. And so forth. Brazen sea where the priest washed. Altar where they offered all the sacrifices. Now notice this. This is the altar of incense. A cubit shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof. So we're talking about this right here. 1 cubit by 1 cubit. Now a cubit is approximately 1.5 feet. 1.5 feet. They said they measured it from the elbow of the king to the tip of his finger. That was approximately a cubit. So you got 1.5 cubits here. And now let me go ahead and read the rest of this. 4 square shall it be, and 2 cubits shall be the height thereof. So it's going to be 2 cubits high. Now, you're going to learn to pay attention to even measurements. Then he says, and thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, because it's... Now, pure gold, that means there's only one altar inside here. Inside inside the temple, only one altar, and that's this altar right here. It's the altar of incense. There's one other altar in the temple of God, and it's this brazen altar. So the fact that it's gold and the fact that it's in altar of incense means it's the one on the inside of the temple or inside of the tabernacle. 4 square shall it be. It's going to be exactly square. It's going to be like it is right here, just a square. Now, 4 square shall it be, and 2 cubits shall be the height thereof. It's going to be 2 cubits high. That's very important. And 2 cubits high shall be the height thereof. The horns thereof shall be of the same. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold. Now we know it, since it's pure gold, we are establishing that it's this altar in here. It's gold. This one out here is bronze. All right. And 2 cubits shall be the height. Thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, the top thereof and the sides thereof, round about, and the horns thereof, and thou shalt make unto it a crown of gold round about. Now, a crown, if you looked at it from the side, it's a square. It's going to have some kind of beautiful work, some kind of beautiful artifice work, a crown. That's what it's talking about there. So it's got a crown on it, just like you'd put a crown on a piece of furniture. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, the top thereof, and the sides thereof, round about, and the horns thereof. And thou shalt make unto it a crown of gold round about, and the 2 gold rings shalt thou make to it under the crown of it, by the 2 corners thereof. Upon 2 sides of it shalt thou make it, and thou shalt be for places for the staves to bear it withal. So it's going to have staves in the side of it, and on each side of it, it's going to have rings, and it's going to have staves, and the staves to carry this altar are going to be gold. Gold. Now, that altar is a picture and a type of the prayers of the saints in the New Testament in Revelation 4 and Revelation 5 and Revelation 8. Now, then he says, and 2 golden rings shalt thou make to it under the crown, by the 2 corners thereof, upon the sides thereof shalt thou make it. It shall be places for the staves to bear it withal. And thou shalt make the staves of shittim wood, and overlay the staves that you carry them with gold. So these are going to be gold staves. This is going to be plated with gold. It's going to be a square. I drew it a rectangle. I'm sorry for that. It's going to be a square, like so. Now, I want you to notice the difference. I'm going to eliminate something here. Now I want you to look over in chapter 25 and look at the first instruction for building another piece of the temple inside. Look at 25. And this is the Lord tells Moses, I want you to build the tabernacle in verse 9. Then he gives him instruction for building the Ark of the Covenant in verse 10 and 11 down. And then down here in verse 23, the other article in there, what I'm bringing out, the priest would eat the showbread. When they were on duty, they would eat the showbread here on this table of showbread. I'm bringing out a point that the only place that you have altars is here and here. And I'm going to say something about the table of the Lord. Table of the Lord. But I want to eliminate some things. Let's go over here to the 25th chapter. Chapter 25. Not 25, 27. 27 and 1. And thou shalt make an altar of shittim wood, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits broad, and the altar shall be 4 square, and the height thereof shall be 3 cubits. So this is going to be 5 cubits. That's this altar right here. 5 cubits. I've got it a rectangle. I'm going to make it. It actually, even in pictures, it's a square. So it's 5 by 5 cubits. A cubit being approximately 1.5 feet, that's going to be 7.5 feet square. Right? 7.5 feet square. Now, and it's going to be 5 cubits long, 5 cubits broad. The altar shall be 4 square, and the height thereof shall be 3 cubits. So the height's going to be height. It's going to be 3 cubits. Or 4.5 feet. Okay? Approximately. All right. Now, and it's going to have, if you go ahead and read down here, down in verse 6, thou shalt make staves for the altar, staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with brass. This is going to be made of brass. So if it's made of brass, it has to be this altar out here. The one inside is gold. And the stave shall be put into the rings, and the stave shall be put upon the two sides of the altar to bear it. And the staves in this will be of brass. And if you read previously there, you'll overlay this one with brass in verse 2. So this altar will be overlaid with brass, and it'll be a perfect square looking at it from the top, and it'll be 3 cubits high. All right, now let me give you one other thing here. Then you've got in Exodus 30, you've got in Exodus 30, verse 1, no, wait, I've already given you that. 25. Now go back to 25. 25. And I want to look here in verse 23. 25, verse 23. Thou shalt make a table. This will be the showbread, the table of showbread. It's going to have to be of gold. It's inside. Thou shalt make a table of shittim wood or acacia. 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth. 2 cubits the length. 2 cubits length, or 3 feet long. 2 cubits are 3 feet long, approximately. 3 feet. And, 25, 23. And thou shalt, 2 cubits shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof, and a cubit and a half the height. So a cubit wide, 1 cubit wide. I'm going to show you how I eliminate something. I'm going to show you how I eliminate something by these measurements. Okay. A cubit, what did I say? A cubit wide? A cubit wide, the breadth, and a cubit and a half in height. 1 1/2 cubits in height. And if you read the text there, it says it has to be overlaid with gold, and it's got to have rings in the side, and the staves or the poles that they carry it with have to be overlaid with gold. Everything inside, that's all a picture of our faith. That triangle of our faith is more precious than gold that perisheth, though it be tried by fire. The 2 pieces of furniture out here are overlaid with brass. Now let me show you something. Go over here to Ezekiel, the 41st chapter. Now, I've been wrestling with this for years. This is Ezekiel's temple, and Ezekiel has some measurement that doesn't measure up with these over here. So it's going to... What I'm doing is eliminating Ezekiel's temple as being the literal temple of God, unless God changes the measurements for Herod's temple, or unless he's talking about the church being the temple of God. And to be honest with you, I don't know what the measurements mean. But one thing you can do is eliminate it being this literal temple over here by the measurements of these altars. And look over here in the 42nd chapter. This is one of those things that I wrestle with. And I think about it from time to time, and I never mention it to anybody. I tell you that there are things that I wrestle with in the Scripture. So when you get over here to the 42nd chapter, all right. The altar, verse 22. Ezekiel is talking about after God destroys the temple You got to remember, Ezekiel was carried into the captivity around 597, 96 BC in the second deportation, when God said he would carry Israel away into captivity. 605 was the first deportation BC, and then 586 was the final one. So when Ezekiel is prophesying, he's prophesying the destruction of the temple in 586. Yet he's talking about rebuilding a temple here and rebuilding these pieces of furniture.
You mean 41 instead of 42?
Did I say 42? Yeah, 41. 41 and verse 22. The altar of wood was 3 cubits high, and the length thereof 2 cubits, 3 cubits high, and 2 cubits, and the length thereof 2 cubits, and the corners thereof, and the length thereof, and the walls thereof were of wood. And he said unto me, this is the table that is before the Lord. This 3 cubits by 2 cubits doesn't match anything over here. Here's 5 by 5. Here's 2 by 3. And here's 1 by 1. You understand what I'm saying? This temple of Ezekiel does not match up with this over here. And Ezekiel is prophesying the demise and destruction of the temple in 586, just a few years down the road from when he's prophesying that. He says, this is the table that is before the Lord. Well, look over here in Ezekiel 44:16. And this is something I wrestle with all the time. It's one of those things that I have not concluded, and I will not stuff a square peg in a round hole. And if you do that studying your Bible, you're doing the wrong thing. I'll study this, and I may just decide to just buckle down and study it and take some time off from my messages. This is the way I deal with things. Now, he says over here in Ezekiel 44:16. Well, let's read 15. And the priest, the Levites, the sons of Zadok. Now, Zadok was the high priest during David's reign, that kept the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near to me to minister unto me. He said they went astray, but they shall come back. Well, who will be the high priest in the New Testament? Jesus. And who will be priests and kings? We will. He's made us priests and kings. And they shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, saith the Lord God. But Ezekiel's prophesying through this whole book. He's living somewhere around 596, 97. He's talking about Israel being destroyed, so he can't be talking about what they're going to be doing anytime in the near future, correct? Right. It's got to be something that's going on over here. I don't believe it's Herod's temple, because they didn't come to him during Herod's day, did they? Nope, did not. They shall enter into my sanctuary. They shall come near to my table. Now that's to my table, to minister unto me. They shall keep my charge, what I've charged them to do, and it shall come to pass that when they enter in at the gates of the inner court, they shall be clothed with linen garments, and no wool shall come upon them whilst they minister in the gates of the inner court therewith. And they shall have linen bonnets upon their heads, and shall have linen breeches. White linen was the picture of righteousness throughout the Scripture. When you see this great multitude in Revelation, the 7th chapter, around the throne of God, and the throne of God was the Ark of the Covenant. That's where he came and sat down. When you see these people with white robes, and the angel of the Lord asked John the Revelator, do you know who these are? And he said, no, I don't know. He said, these are they who have made their robes white in the blood of Christ. And white in a blood baptism was a martyrdom or a death. So those that who died the death are going to be clothed in white And we minister around the throne of God. Have linen breeches upon their loins. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causeth sweat, or some laborious thing, and that makes me think of resting in the Lord. And when they go forth into the utter court, even unto the utter court to the people, they shall put off their garments wherein they ministered, and lay them in the holy chambers, and they shall put on other garments, and they shall not sanctify the people with their garments. Neither shall they shave their heads, nor suffer their locks to grow long. They shall only poll their heads. Neither shall any priest drink wine when they enter into the inner court. And it goes on and on. But let me show you something. When he talked about, they shall come near my table. Look over here in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 10. 1 Corinthians 10. This is one of the many things this is one of those air hooks that I have. I've told y'all about. I have air hooks out here. I don't try to stuff a meaning into something, try to shave off the edges and make a square peg going around a hole. If you do that, when you get older, the longer you live, you're going to come up one day, find out something don't mean what it says, and you're going to have to go looking for those little shavings and glue them back onto that square peg and let it fit where it wants to fit. Now look over here in 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 10. And since we got to all these different altars, I thought I better at least give you something that this is one of my air hook things. I leave them on those air hooks, and a lot of times I'll leave something on what I call my air hook, and I'll be studying along 10 or 15 years later, and something will be hanging there for years, and I'll be reading along in one of my books, and I'll be reading, and all of a sudden something will go, and I go, oh, there it is. That's what and it'll just shock me that something will find its place. The Word of God will find its place if you leave it alone and keep reading. Don't try to make things fit. Something I learned a long time ago. Don't do that. Now look here in 1 Corinthians 10. And let's read in verse 16. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? Well, it was against Jewish law to drink blood there in the Leviticus 17th chapter. You couldn't drink any human blood. You couldn't drink any blood. That's what they call kosher. Whenever they would drain the blood correctly and cut the lamb up or whatever they were going to eat, the bullock, cut it up to eat, it had to be cooked kosher and it had to be bled correctly. And the cup of blessing was a term for the third cup of the Passover, which we bless. Is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? And to drink of a cup of blood was an old ancient idiom that meant to undergo a death. Can you drink the cup that I drink of? Jesus asked James and John. The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? So eating of the bread, when Jesus held the bread up and said, this bread is my body, when he said, this is my body, he used the word estin, is, E-S-T-I-N. It means represents. That word is not even our word is. Our word is a form of the verb to be. And if you get into the Greek, to be or to exist usually is the word E-I-N-A-I. So that's not the word is in the Greek. It's the word estin. It means represents. He said, this bread represents my body. Remember, they always did everything under a contract. So he's talking about eating or partaking of the body of Christ, which is the church. There's one body, Ephesians 4 and 5, and that body, Colossians 1:18 and 1:24, is the church. So he's talking about partaking of the church, and you find that partaking in the 12th chapter of 1 Corinthians. God places everyone in the body as it pleases him. Then he says, for we being many are one bread and one body. We are the one body. And we're baptized into that body with a blood baptism. For we are all partakers of that one bread. Behold, Israel after the flesh, are not they which eat of sacrifices partakers of the altar? And these priests over here would partake of that altar. They would partake of that altar. So he's talking about what altar we partake of. That altar represented the cross. That was a shadow of the cross in the Old Testament, because all the sacrifices were offered there. The Passover was offered there. The atonement goat on the 10th day of the 7th month was offered there. Now let's look over here at, let's keep reading. What say I then? That the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, to daemonion. He's saying these people here, these people at Corinth, when they're offering sacrifices to Venus or Hercules or Aphrodite over in Greece, or any of these gods, or Juno, all these were daemonion, or demons. That's what Paul is saying here. They called their gods by the title of demons, which means to distribute fortunes, because all of those gods would come and protect them and bring them fortunes from the underworld, and that's just a shadow of what's going on in the world today. And then he says, they sacrifice to the devil and not to God. I would not that ye should fellowship with demons, or daemonion, or gods of this world. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and the table of devils. The Lord's table, remember over there in Ezekiel, the Lord's table was this altar, but it didn't have the dimensions of these altars over here. So this has to do with some kind of spiritual altar. I believe it's probably the church. I do not know why those dimensions differ with these dimensions over here, but the Lord's table over here is in opposition to Daemonion's table, because it says you cannot, here's what he's saying, you cannot fulfill self in the table of the Lord is nomos, the Greek word law, and all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, agape, and agape is walking in the commandments of God. You cannot walk in God's commandments and eat of God's table and partake of His law and fulfill self at the same time. What he's saying is something that's absolutely not possible. He's not saying, I won't let you do that. He says it's not possible to be up on the top of a building and down on the bottom floor at the same time. It's impossible to be backward and forward at the same time. And it's impossible to eat at the Lord's table and the devil of distributing fortunes, and the table of distributing fortunes, which is the meaning of the word demon or daemonion. You cannot eat at God's table. So I believe that table of the Lord in Ezekiel, the 41st and 43rd chapter is talking about a table over here, because the dimensions don't meet the dimensions in cubits of any of these measurements over here. That's the way I said earlier, I'm going to show you how to eliminate something. I've eliminated by these measurements that it's not this temple over here. Maybe God just changed the dimensions on them to show us it's not over there. He calls that the Lord's table in Ezekiel, And Ezekiel's prophesying about these instruments being carried away when Nebuchadnezzar comes in 586 BC and carries them all into captivity. Then when you get to Colossians 2:14, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances, all the rituals that went with these instruments here, they're blotted out and everything becomes spiritual. That's why I believe it has to be, Ezekiel's temple has to be the spiritual church. Now, I haven't taught on Ezekiel's temple. It's one of the most difficult things in all the Bible. It's hard. And I've looked at it and studied it, and I'll possibly go into it a little more, but this is one of the things that I wrestle with right here. But I wrestle with the finality of it all. I don't believe Ezekiel's temple or his tabernacle is this over here. And one of the main reasons is for the measurements. Another reason is because Colossians 2:14. Another reason is because the table of the Lord is spoken of in the New Testament after God has blotted out the handwriting of ordinances, which was contrary to us, took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross to do away with one contract, or do away with this contract over here. You had to take the contracting parties in public, drive a nail through it, that held up in their courts of law. So, all right, that's something I wanted to show you and just familiarize you with. And if you want to go into studying this temple of Ezekiel, that'll be great. Now, I want us to go back to where we've been studying. That's just kind of an intro to show you something that I wrestle with. And maybe you can help me study on that. All right. All right. Now, where we are, that's some independent thoughts. How much time did I take there, Mike? 51? Okay. I took 51 minutes to say that? No. I started to say. All right. Now, we're back over here, and we're still talking about this Old Testament instruction on building the temple has a tremendous, and building all the furniture of the temple and setting down all the laws of the temple. Now remember, the temple is, I'm going to kind of keep it up here. I need a permanent drawing of it. There's the table of showbread. Well, I need to make it square, don't I? No, it's not square. And make this square. And make the brazen altar square. I'll start making it square. And the brazen sea, well, it probably wasn't that big compared to the rest of it. Brazen sea, it had all these baths for the priest to wash in. There would be Solomon's porch when it was turned into the temple, the candlesticks, and the Ark of the Covenant there. Now, where we are, I'm going to give you something else, something I haven't finished on.
I got a question.
What?
How did they get the smoke in there?
How'd they get it? How'd they get it inside of here? Well, the writers say they went out here they took this golden censer, dipped it down in the coals off of the altar when they were offering on the Day of Atonement, 10th day of the 7th month. 7th month. 7th month was Tishri. Tishri is our month, September, October. The high priest could only go in there once a year. That was it. One time. And they believed that he took, of course you had cherubim facing one another. Some say the cherubim's wing would touch the side of the inner sanctuary. Some say they believe that the Ark of the Covenant faced this way with the wings pointing that way. But nobody really knows. What they did is believed that they took this censer is like a cup made of gold. Nothing could come in here unless it was Thus it was of beaten gold. It was actually probably a wooden cup covered with beaten gold, just like all of these were made of acacia wood or shittim wood, but they were covered with gold. And some say that they dipped this censer down into the coals while they were offering the atonement goat, which was a sin offering for the people, sin offering. And they took this censer, dipped it into the coals, and it's believed they brought it in and set it down between the cherubim, and then brought the some incense off of this altar of incense, came inside and dropped it on top of the coals, and it began to smoke up that inner part of the sanctuary. Now where we are, we're talking about, I've got some things that I'm just trying to cover up the loose ends. We talked about you had to be a son of Levi to be able to work inside the sanctuary. You had to be a son of Aaron. Levi had 3 sons: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And the high priest is going to come out of Kohath. So no matter how many offshoots you have here, none of these can be a high priest of Gershon or Merari. Nobody can be a high priest out of those. But they will be priests, and they'll take care of the furniture of the temple. They'll take care of they'll take care of shepherding out here, sheep they're going to be offered, and whatever other jobs there was. But Kohath has 4 sons. He's got Amram, he's got Izhar, Hebron, and Uzziah. And Amram has got 2 sons, Aaron and Moses. And Moses will be the deliverer. He's going to be a picture of Christ. Aaron will be a picture of the Holy Spirit. His is going to be the priesthood, or the high priest. The high priest. And he's got 4 sons. He's got Nadab, Abihu. They are killed by God because they offered strange fire, probably from this altar of incense. There in Leviticus, the 10th chapter, they offered strange fire to God, and God killed them. And that left Eleazar and Ithamar. So during the time of Israel as a nation, when they leave Egypt, after Joseph is in Egypt, and after they leave Egypt, go through the wilderness at the leadership of Moses, wilderness, they come back into the land that had been given to Abraham many years before, at least 600 years before. They come back into the land, they become a nation. Israel is a nation, and while they're a nation, from around 1096 BC, under Saul, the first king, until their demise in 586 BC, the priesthood will be these 2 men and their descendants. And whenever you get into Zadok, who's the son of Ithamar, you get into Abiathar, and you get into Elimelech, and these other guys, they all come out of these 2 men right here. And you could not be a high priest. You had to be of the tribe of Levi, couldn't be a high priest, and you certainly couldn't come from any of those other tribes and do any work in the temple of God. Now I got 2 other men I want to show you what they did. You have you have a man named Uzziah. Uzziah is of the tribe of Judah. That's the wrong tribe to do. He's not even a Levite. And he presumes to go into this temple. Whew. That's scary to do that. You don't do that. We've had God kill some other priests. He killed some other men. He would kill a man just for doing the wrong thing. He told Aaron in that 25th chapter, in the 10th chapter of Leviticus, if you mourn over Nadab and Abihu, or your sons mourn over them, I'll kill all of you. Don't you even mourn. Don't you put sackcloth and ashes on. I'll kill you for that. They knew what they did was wrong. If you were a Levite, even a son of Aaron, and you offered strange fire and didn't go by God's instruction or God's doctrine, you could die for that. God's instruction, we've been talking about God's doctrine. The word instruction means doctrine. A doctrine means instruction. It's in the New Testament, the word didache or didaskalia, Didaskalia. If you did something wrong, and if you are of another tribe, even a king, and a righteous king at that, one who did more for Israel when it comes to advancing their, I don't want to say technology, but advancing them as a nation in all of the learning and all they did. In fact, I want us to look at him and see what he did. Look over here in 2 Chronicles. Now, Uzziah had another name, Azariah. Azariah. He's called Azariah, but Azariah was a real common name, and he's referred to in 2 Chronicles as Uzziah. But he is the son of Amaziah, who is the son of Joash, who is the son of Ahaziah, who's the son of Jehoram, who's the son of Jehoshaphat, who's the son of Asa, who's the son of Abijah, who's the son of Rehoboam, who is the son of Solomon, who is the son of David. This is David's lineage right here. It's the tribe of Judah. And look here in 2 Chronicles, the 26th chapter. And let's look at what he presumed to do. People that presume to do things with God, there's people that have come to grace and truth to presume to take charge. Watch out. God might kill you. You can't just go in and presume new doctrines that you want to presume. Now go to this 26th chapter, 2 Chronicles. In fact, Uzziah had a very prominent place in history as far as the kings of Israel. In fact, he was so well known and so respected for all of his accomplishments in Israel that, and I hold your place here and go over to Isaiah, the 6th chapter. This is very, very popular because Isaiah is prophesying the destruction of Israel. Isaiah, I'll just read the first 3 verses. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphims. Each one had 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, and with twain he covered his feet, and with twain or 3 he did fly. And one cried unto another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. There's the Trinity right there. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Now go back over here to the 26th chapter of 2 Chronicles. And all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the room of his father Amaziah. Right here. Amaziah, however you want to pronounce it. We're not going to get all of it pronounced correctly anyway. He is Amaziah's son. Remember, Joash, Amaziah's father, was the one that was saved when Athaliah tried to kill all the seed royal of Israel. Remember that? All right, now. He was 16 years old, and they made him king in his father's place. He built Elath and restored it to Judah. After that, the king slept with his fathers. 16 years old was Uzziah when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. 52 years. Long reign. Very, very progressive man. Did more for Israel's progression than any other king before or after him. His father's name was Jecoliah of Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jecoliah of Jerusalem, and he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. He was a righteous king, a good man. We've seen some other kings fall. We saw Solomon fall and go after 1,000 women, had 700 wives and 300 concubines, and they turned his heart away from God. Nehemiah said that in Nehemiah the 13th chapter. You find that in the 11th chapter of 1 Kings. According to all that his father Amaziah did, and he sought God in the days of Zechariah the prophet. Now we know where Zechariah is prophesying. Who had understanding in the visions of God. As long as he sought the Lord, God made him prosper. But everybody in Israel didn't prosper. Just he prospered. And he went forth and warred against the Philistines and brake down the wall of Gath and the wall of Jebna and the wall of Ashdod. These are major cities in the land of the Philistines. The land of the Philistines is actually located in Israel. There's a Mediterranean Sea, and here's what we call Lebanon. And then below that would be Israel. And then the land of the Philistines was a section on the southwestern corner of Israel, and that was what we call the Gaza Strip. So you can see the appeal. Here's Jerusalem not too far from the land of the Philistines. So you can see the problem at the Philistines. Why are they there? Because the Lord told Israel when they came out of Egypt and came in there in the book of Judges, and they told them, drive out all of these Philistines and these Hittites and Perizzites and Jebusites, and Israel didn't do it. They married them. So you had garrisons of Philistines all over Israel. That's why they always had to meet at Gilgal. That was a central point of location for the Israelites to go and fight the Philistines or the Ammonites or whoever they're going to fight. Now, where was I? What? All right. And he went forth and warred against the Philistines and brake down all these walls. Verse 7, God helped him against the Philistines. God helped Uzziah. He's a good man. He was a righteous man. He would do everything right, you would think. And against the Arabians that dwelt in Gerbal, and the Mehunims, and the Ammonites gave gifts to Uzziah. That's what we call northern Jordan. The land of Ammon is there. It's right next door to Israel. This is the land of Ammon here. And Amman, Jordan, is the capital city of Jordan, which is northern and southern Jordan. Southern Jordan would be the old land of Moab. And moreover, Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem, verse 9, at the corner gate and of the valley gate, and at the turning of the wall, fortified them. And he built towers in the desert, and digged many wells, for he had much cattle, both in the low country and in the plains, husbandmen also, vine dressers in the mountains in Carmel, for he loved husbandry. Adamah, A-D-A-M-A-H. He loved soil. He was a country boy. A-D-A-M-A-H. He loved planting. And God is on his side. You know, he sounds a lot like Solomon, doesn't he? I got me maid singers and men singers and maid dancers and pools of water and everything that my heart wanted. Moreover, Uzziah had an host of fighting men, verse 11, that went out to war by bands, according to the number of their account, by the hand of Jael, the scribe, and Maaseiah, the ruler, under the hand of Hananiah, one of the king's captains. And the whole number of the chief of the fathers of the mighty men of valor were 2,600. These are just his mighty men of valor, his great leaders. And under their hand was an army, 300,000 and 7,500, that made war with mighty power to help the king against the enemy. Uzziah was successful. And Uzziah prepared for them throughout all the hosts shields and spears and helmets and habergeons, which are breastplates or coats of mail, that wiry stuff they would wear to keep the spears from the arrows from going into it, and bows and slings and cast stones. They had those stones that they used in slings, and they were very good at them. Some say they could hit a hair's breadth at 50 yards. And he made in Jerusalem engines and invented cunning men to be on the towers and upon the bulwarks to shoot arrows and great stones withal. And his name, Uzziah's name, was spread abroad. And he was marvelously helped till he was strong. Watch out when you get strong and you start prospering. Deuteronomy 8 says, and you forget the Lord thy God. He was a good man. He was just like Solomon. He was as righteous a man as you could have on the throne of Israel. But when he was strong, oh me, oh, there we go. When he was strong, he forgot God. But when he was strong, his heart was lifted up to his destruction. David, right before he died, right before he turned the throne over to Solomon, David got real proud in his old age. He started numbering Israel and said, I got 1,800,000 men in that 23rd chapter of 2 Samuel, and said, it's my mighty hand that I've done this. And God said, I'm going to kill some people in Israel for that. When Nebuchadnezzar said, see great Babylon that I have built, God said the words wasn't out of his mouth till God struck him down on his all fours. When men get proud and lifted up, they can fall. You say, I can't fall. I'm a Christian. You mean you're stronger than Solomon, stronger than David when he committed murder and adultery? You're stronger than Uzziah? He ruled for 52 years. But look what happens to him here. For he transgressed against the Lord his God when he got strong and he got powerful. And remember, he loves God. God made him to prosper in verse 5. And went into the temple of the Lord to burn incense upon the altar of incense. Whew. He's of the tribe of Judah. He has no business being there. He's told, don't do this. Uzziah, you can't come in here. You've presumed too much. And Azariah the priest, now this is probably why they called him Uzziah, because Azariah was one of his other names. Azariah the priest went in after him, with him, 80 priests of the Lord that were valiant men. Remember, the priests were also fighting men. 80 priests go in with Azariah, the priest of God. And they withstood Uzziah the king and said unto him, this doesn't concern you, Uzziah. This appertaineth not to thee. You don't have any business in here. You may be the king, but you're not supposed to be here. Uzziah, to burn incense unto the Lord, But to the priests, the sons of Aaron, this belongs to. You're not a Levite, much less a son of Aaron. You're of the tribe of Judah. That's the only reason you're king of Israel. But you are king. You've got a lot of honor in that. But you had no business in the temple. Only sons of Aaron. Only sons of Aaron. We've been studying that, hadn't we? And they withstood the king and said, this has nothing to do with you. This is none of your business to burn incense unto the Lord. But to the priests, the sons of Aaron, that are consecrated to burn incense, go out of the sanctuary. Get out of here, king. That's what they're saying. Go out of here. You have no business here. For thou hast trespassed against God. Neither shall it be for thine honor from the Lord God. And then Uzziah gets angry. He's wroth. He gets upset. I'm the king. You're going to tell me what to do. You don't understand, king. You got your job. We got ours. And had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was wroth with the priest, leprosy even arose up in his forehead before the priest in the house of the Lord from beside the altar of incense, the one that was made of gold. God struck him with leprosy, didn't he? He did that to Aaron, to Miriam, when she had consulted with Aaron and said, we need to go and talk to our brother Moses. He presumes too much. And look, he married a black woman. He married an Ethiopian. And God says to Aaron, Aaron, he tells Moses, you go tell Aaron, I want to talk to him at the door of the temple. And he comes to the door of the temple there in Numbers, the 9th chapter. And he says, Aaron, he says, my approval is on this marriage. Don't you talk back to me. And he struck Miriam, whose idea all this was, Aaron and Moses' sister, and he struck her with leprosy. You can't just presume things with God. And Azariah the priest, verse 20, and all the chief priests looked upon him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead, and they thrust him out of the temple where he presumed to offer sacrifice. Yea, himself hasted also to go out, because the Lord had smitten him, and he was a righteous, good man. Shows you how far away a man can get when he gets real proud of all that God has caused him to accomplish. And Uzziah the king was a leper until the day of his death. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up, and dwell in the several house, being a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. And Jotham his son was over the king's house, judging the people of the land. And Jotham starts ruling Israel before Uzziah dies, because he's struck with leprosy, and he has to live separated from Israel, because he presumed, I am this great successful king for the last 50 plus years, and I can go in here and offer incense. No, you can't. Everybody has got a place in the house of God, and God has put every man in the body as it has pleased him, and everybody can't do the same job. He was a leper till the day of his death, and dwelt in the several house, being a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. Jotham his son was over the king's house, judging the people of the land. Now the rest of the acts of Uzziah, first and last, did Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, write. So Uzziah slept with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the field of the burial which belonged to the kings. For they said, he is a leper, and Jotham his son reigned in his stead. And he's referred to another time over here in 2 Kings, if you look over in 2 Kings. It doesn't say much about him in 2 Kings. You'll have a lot of stuff in one section of the book you don't have in another. 2 Kings, the 15th chapter. Now, 2 Kings, the 15th chapter, has got a lot about different kings in here. 2 Kings, 15th chapter. In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, began Azariah, son of Amaziah, king of Judah, to reign. The son of Amaziah, is Uzziah. That's why we know that this Azariah was just another name for Uzziah, and king of Judah to reign. 16 years old. That's what Second Chronicles 26 says. He was 16 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 250 years, and that's what 2 Chronicles, the 26th chapter, says. He reigned 52 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jecoliah of Jerusalem, and that's what the 26th chapter of 2 Chronicles says. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done, save that the high places were not removed. The people sacrificed and burned incense still in the high places. And the Lord smote the king, so that he was a leper unto the day of his death. But it doesn't tell why in all of this. So you have to read, if you're going to read 2 Kings, you got to read 2 Chronicles to get the full story on Azariah, or Uzziah, as he was also called. And dwelt in several houses, because several house was one that was set away because he was a leper. And Jotham, the king's son, Uzziah's son, and Jotham, the king's son, where was I? Lost my place. Verse 5. And the Lord smote the king, so that he was a leper unto the day of his death, and dwelt in several houses. Jotham, the king's son, was over the house, and judging the people of the land. Now, we see that God is not going to allow just anybody to go in here into this temple and do as they please, is he? No sirree. Now, let me give you another illustration of God being displeased with people who want to go against his word. There's another illustration of this in Nehemiah, the 6th chapter. Let's go to Nehemiah. Nehemiah, the 6th chapter. Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms. Ezra, Nehemiah. Joshua, Judges, Ruth. First, Ezra, Nehemiah. Nehemiah, the 6th chapter. Now, Nehemiah has been given the decree to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. He's been given a decree in 444 BC. Jerusalem is destroyed. Well, you understand this, that you have to be a son of, you have to be a descendant of Aaron to be a high priest and to go into the temple. And Nehemiah, in 444 BC, in Nehemiah, the 2nd chapter, he gets a decree from Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes was the king. He was the king of Persia. After Persia overthrows Babylon in 539 BC. So Artaxerxes is the king. They've already gotten 3 other decrees. One in 457, 56. That's approximately BC. That was given by Artaxerxes. We'll call him Art. He's given by Artaxerxes to supply for supplies for the temple. Supplies for the temple. The temple, you've got 2 other temple decrees. This one is in Ezra, the the 7th chapter. Ezra, the 6th chapter. 6th chapter, Darius is the Persian king, and he gives a decree to rebuild the temple. That's why Ezra himself is bringing back supplies in that 7th chapter of Ezra. And this one's given by Darius, and that's reaffirming the first decree in Ezra, the 1st chapter. Ezra, the 1st chapter, and that is given by Cyrus after he overthrows Babylon in the previous chapter, which is 2nd Chronicles, the 36th chapter. Ezra comes right after 2nd Chronicles. He overthrows Babylon, overthrows Nebuchadnezzar. We just call him Neb. He overthrows him. And in 444, he gets the decree from Artaxerxes to rebuild the temple. And he has all of this opposition. And this opposition comes in the form of a man named Sanballat. Now remember, he's coming from over here in Babylon. Now you have to remember something. He was a cupbearer. This is Nehemiah. Nehemiah, he's over here in Babylon. He's on this Euphrates River where it's separated from the Tigris here. And here's the Euphrates. Here's the Tigris. And Babylon is down there somewhere on the bottom of Iraq. Or bottom of that's Iraq right there. He's down here. They found the ruins of Babylon down here. They call them the ruins of Nimrod, right above the Persian Gulf. So, Nehemiah is leaving. He's in the presence. He's a cupbearer. Cupbearer. The cupbearer was, sometimes the cupbearer is called a butler. Not a butler that we think of, that one that helps you put on your clothes and answers the door for you. You remember the butler over there in the 41st chapter of Genesis when Joseph was thrown in jail with the butler of the king and the baker of the king? That butler was the same thing as a cupbearer. A cupbearer is the one that bore the cup for the king, would come to the king and hold his cup out to him and let him take it. But if the king thought that he had some enemies that were trying to kill him, he would tell his cupbearer, "You drink of it, and if you don't die, then I'll drink it." But and the king had to be very close to the cupbearer. He had to have the utmost trust. And usually, most cupbearers would be eunuchs. The reason for that, so they couldn't have children. They wouldn't have an interest in raising up an army to overthrow the king, so they would usually have them emasculated or have their genitals removed. And that's probably believed what Nehemiah was. It was against God's law for anyone who had genital injury to even get close to the temple of God. That was against God's law. So there's no way Nehemiah can get close. Nehemiah, the 6th chapter. Now he's got some enemies, Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabian. We don't know who that Arabian was. Tobiah, Sanballat. Sanballat is the nemesis or the arch enemy of Nehemiah. Nehemiah leaves.
Geshem was the Arabian. Geshem.
Geshem? Yeah, that's right. He had a name, didn't he? Geshem, that's right. I'm sorry. The Arabian was Geshem. Now these were enemies. These were enemies, particularly Sanballat. You got to remember, Nehemiah left Babylon He goes to Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes sees him in his court, and he's very sad and very unhappy. And it was against Persian law to be unhappy in the court of a Persian king. You could die for that. Well, when he went in, but there's only one thing. Artaxerxes loved Nehemiah. He even said, "What's wrong? Why are you so sad, Nehemiah?" He said, "I have heard the message that my city, Jerusalem, it's about 600 miles from here. I'm over here, and I heard from my brothers that came in Nehemiah, the 1st chapter, that the walls of Jerusalem are burnt to the ground and the temple is burnt to the ground." And he said, "I need to go over there and rebuild the city." Now, the temple has already been rebuilt. It's already been resupplied with things. That was in 457. So we're talking about 13 years later down the road, Nehemiah, who must have been a contemporary of Ezra, who at that time brought the 3rd decree, he goes back over here. He's given a decree by Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes says, "I'll give you the decree, but when are you coming back?" He said, "As soon as I can get the city built." It took 12 years. Now, he didn't build everything. If the city was like this, he built the walls. It took 12 years to build the walls of the city and some makeshift buildings in there. The buildings had to be built over the years. So when he comes back here, these enemies that he has are not in Babylon. They're over here trying to thwart the efforts of Nehemiah as he builds this here. And this is one of his confrontations here in this 6th chapter with a man named Sanballat. Now let's read a little. "And it came to pass, when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian and the rest of our enemies heard that I had builded the wall." These were enemies. He said, the rest of our enemies. These are men who were living in Israel. They heard that I had builded the wall, and that there was no breach left therein, no break in the wall, though at that time I had not set up the doors upon the gates, that Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, "Come, let us meet together in some one of the villages in the plain of Ono," but they thought to do me mischief. They're going to try to get me, Nehemiah says. "And I sent messengers unto them, saying, I'm doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease, whilst I leave it and come down to you? Yet they sent unto me 4 times after this sort." They're trying to trick Nehemiah. "And I answered them after the same manner. Then sent Sanballat his servant unto me." Sanballat sends his servant in like manner the 5th time. This is 5 times they tried to trick Nehemiah, with an open letter in his hand. And anyone could be reading this. Usually the letters were placed in silk bags, tied up and sealed with an official seal, and anyone would be able to read this in its being transported. Wherein was written, "It is reported among the heathen that Gashmu saith it, that thou and the Jews think to rebel." They're constantly being, the people who are rebuilding the temple are constantly being accused of rebelling against the king of Babylon over here that sent Nehemiah. They're being accused of rebelling against Artaxerxes, but Artaxerxes is not going to believe that. He don't believe that at all. "For which cause thou buildest the wall, that thou mayest be their king according to these words. And thou hast also appointed prophets to preach of thee at Jerusalem, saying, There is a king in Judah." There was no king in Judah. They're lying about everything. Artaxerxes and the rest of the Persian Empire is not going to let Jerusalem have kings. They had a governor that was governing over there, and they would take one of the lineages of David's, they would take one of David's lineages after these kings and cause him to be governor. At one point there in Babylon, Zerubbabel, who is in the lineage of the kings of Judah, but he wasn't a king because they weren't allowed to have kings after the last king, Zedekiah. Zerubbabel, later on down the line, is governor in Judah. So what they're doing is lying about what these people in Jerusalem, they're just over there building the city. They're not over there trying to raise themselves up. But that's what these enemies are doing. There's a king in Judah, verse 7. And now shall it be reported to the king according to these words, Come now therefore, and let us take counsel together. Then I said unto him, saying, There are no such things done as thou sayest, but thou feignest them out of thine own heart. You are hypocrites. You're lying to me. You want to trap Nehemiah. Nehemiah is a godly man. For they all made us afraid, saying, Their hands shall be weakened from the work, that it be not done. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands, Nehemiah says. Afterwards I came into the house of Shimei, the son of Delaiah, the son of Mahatabeel, who was shut up, and he said, Let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple, and let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come to slay thee, yea, in the night will they come to slay thee. And I said, Should such a man as I flee? And who is there that, being as I am, would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. I cannot go into the temple. The temple is only for the sons of Aaron, and I am not this. And he probably was a eunuch. They're trying to get him into the temple, and Nehemiah refuses. And lo, I perceive that God hath not sent him, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me. For Tobiah and Sanballat hath hired him to say, Let's go into the temple, and you can save your life in the temple. God would have killed him in the temple. Therefore was he hired, that I should be afraid to do so and sin, and that might have matter for an evil report, that they might reproach me. My God, thank thou upon Tobiah and Sanballat according to these their works, and on the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets that would put me in fear. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul, in 52 days. Now, I just wanted to show you that you can't just do the things that you want to do, break the laws of God, and go into the temple. This shows that God will not put up. We're the temple of God, aren't we? Know ye not that your body's the temple of the Holy Spirit? Look at that over here. Am I out of time, Mike? 5 minutes. Gosh, I thought I'd get further than this. Look over here in first. Everything in the Old Testament is a shadow of the New. I just barely got started tonight. In fact, if you remember, well, let me show you something before I'll go ahead and show you this.
You didn't say where.
Huh?
You didn't say where.
Didn't say what?
Where?
Oh, 1 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter. Now the Old Testament was a shadow. These guys were a shadow of what God will do in the new. 1 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter. I read some of this recently. We're talking about here, the Old Testament, the temple of God was called the building of God. Solomon said, God hath commissioned me to build him a house in Jerusalem. We're heavenly Jerusalem, the church. The house of the Lord was the temple. That's where they tried to seduce Nehemiah to go into. Nehemiah knew better than to go into the temple. So over here, this is the house of God. Now we're God's house. Christ is the son of his own house. Whose house are we? And look here in the 3rd chapter. And he talks about us being God's building. We are laborers together with God. Verse 9, chapter 3 of 1 Corinthians. You are God's husbandry. You are God's building. All through the Scripture, the temple is called the building of the Lord, or the building of God. It was also called the house of the Lord. It was called the temple. According to the grace of God which is given unto me, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another buildeth thereon. But let every man take heed how he buildeth thereupon. For other foundation can no man lay than is laid, which is Jesus Christ. And if any man build upon, or build the temple of God, upon a foundation of gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hair, stubble, it's all the same. Gold is the same thing as wood, hair, stubble. Silver is the same as wood, hair, stubble, because it's material. That's what he's talking about. We don't build the house of God upon material things. We don't build God's kingdom with silver and gold. Every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire. The fire shall try every man's work that's in the church. It's not going to try the work of man that's outside the church. Well, it will. It'll burn up all his works. Of what sort it is. If any man's work abide, or it continue, which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he's not talking about the man be burned, but his work be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? That is, the truth dwells in us. Holy Spirit's truth, John 14, 15, 16, John 15, 26, John 16, 13, 1 John 5 and 6. The Spirit is the truth. If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. Well, men defiled it over here, didn't they? Uzziah walked in there and tried to offer, and God destroyed him. It didn't mean that he's destroyed and going to go to hell. It just meant his physical body, God just destroyed him. If a man defiles this temple with uncleanness, he says, I'll destroy him. Him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. We're the temple in heavenly Jerusalem. And he's written his law on fleshy tables of our hearts. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool that he may be wise. He's saying, here's one way you can defile the temple of God. Think you're somebody when you're nothing. When a man thinks he's something and he's nothing, he's defiling the temple of God with his pride. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, He taketh the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knoweth the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain. The wise in this world. Therefore let no man glory in men, for all things are yours. Whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas, who is Peter, or the world or life or death, or things present, or things to come, all are yours. And you are Christ, and Christ is God's, and we are His temple. I'm out of time. Let's pray. Father, thank you for truth. Help us to see these words, Lord. God, we pray that you'll give us strength not to defile this temple. You said you'll destroy this. You will destroy this outer man, Lord. You've just about destroyed me physically for having defiled this temple. I pray not to defile this temple anymore, Lord. I pray you give the sheep strength to understand that they can't do that. That this temple is holy, and we're supposed to live righteously and godly. Thank you for truth. Lead us to your elect. In Christ's name, amen. I was going a lot further than that. I thought I was going to have more time. I don't know why I said the Arabian didn't have a name. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I said the Arabian didn't have a name. I was thinking of somebody else. Because it's right there. I got so many things going on in my head. I knew Geshem. I just went blank. So many things to say. Most people never heard of Uzziah. They didn't heard of it. Good God, man. It's like,